Good evening and welcome to our first edition of Fall 2015 of the CCFLT Early Career Language Teacher Hangout. And I'm super excited for this month to be joined by fellow CCFLT board member Connie Navarro. Good evening, Connie.
I know. How are you?
I am so fantastic, and I guess I should mention to anybody watching, this is a fundraiser mustache, not a real mustache. It goes away at the end of the month. I look stupid, and my friends donate money to Denver Urban Scholars.
What a good program.
It is an awesome program. They provide really intense mentoring, and anybody who wants to know more can ask me about it. So really excited to have you with us tonight. And just before we jump into teacher evaluation, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and just your journey from teaching language to observing language.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I have this little presentation for us to sort of guide my thinking. So this is me. I was a French teacher for 20 years. I taught in these districts. You can look that over. I'm currently a teacher on special assignment for Denver Public Schools. My title is Peer Observer for World Languages. So I observe, coach, and evaluate about 100 teachers every year for about 3 years. So I have literally seen hundreds of world language lessons. I took this job because in the 20 years I had been a French teacher, the most feedback I ever got was, hey, your room is cute, your kids were good, satisfactory. So if I really wanted to be a better language teacher, I certainly didn't go to my principal or assistant principal. I was really excited that Denver was going to offer this content area match. So in Denver, they have peer observers for mathematics and early childhood education and drama and every content area you can think of. It's my great pleasure to get to be in world language classrooms all day, every day, and really take a fine lens to excellent teaching. So one of the things that teachers report to me about observation is that they're nervous. So how can new teachers get over being nervous? I asked some new teachers and some veteran teachers, and their advice was practice. If you have the opportunity to videotape yourself, right? If you can have even just a kid hold your phone and make a video of a lesson, that would give you a lot of information about what you're doing, how fast you talk, which is my greatest area for growth because I'm a fast talker. And also what else is going on in your room, how clear you are, how many minutes it takes to move from activity to activity, right? Take a video of yourself. It's great practice for yourself.
I love that so much. And I should mention to anybody who's watching us live that you can submit questions for Connie using the Q&A app. And that Connie came to us super prepared. I sent her some questions ahead of time and she made a whole presentation for us. So really excited to have such a prepared guest with us this evening. And, you know, when you talk about teachers videotaping themselves, you know, I think one of the challenges is how to not make that overwhelming. And so do you have any insights to that? You know, should teachers record the whole class? Should they record every class all day and teach 6 hours, then watch 6 hours of video? Or what kind of insights can you offer?
I cannot imagine that after teaching for 6 hours or 8 hours to then go watch that 8 hours would be doable at all. So yeah, you're right. We need to start small with ourselves, right? So even if you just were able to set up a video camera in the back if your school has one, but honestly, if your phone can record you and you can prop that up, or you can ask a kid to, hey, will you videotape me doing just the warm-up, right? Just the entrance and the first 15 minutes of class would give you a lot of information. You're right, Noah, we need to not be so all-encompassing. Sometimes teachers want to jump in and do everything, right? But then if it's 8 hours, it's too much video to watch.
Totally. And I'm curious, when you say to ask other teachers to observe you, and I assume part of that goes hand in hand is also asking to observe other teachers.
Absolutely, right? So having people come in to watch you is to help you get over being nervous in front of other people, right? And then whether or not they're looking for something specific or they're just in the room sometimes helps people. You should also go see other teachers. So if you have another world language teacher in your building, that's always a great idea. Just stop in during your planning period for 10 minutes, or if you can stay longer, that's great. Observing teachers of other contents is also a good idea because you can get other ideas for rituals and routines, or how to give feedback, or how to group students, right? So anytime you can get into another teacher's classroom, it's a great idea.
Yeah, it can be so huge. And another question before I move you on to another topic is, on those videos, is it helpful to have just specific look fors so that you're not being overly critical of yourself? You know, I think about when we're grading student work, we don't necessarily fill the entire paper in red ink because of everything that's wrong. We'll focus on certain things that are wrong, or certain areas for improvement. Is that also helpful when early career teachers are videoing their own classrooms?
Absolutely. So you're right? We could take the whole thing apart, but that's too much all at once. So later in the presentation, I'm going to share some ideas of some free downloadable templates of things to look for. And you could say to your person who's coming in, I really just want you to focus on this one, or I'm going to watch my video and look for these 3. So we'll do that. You could also just say to yourself as you're watching, or if you invite someone else in, am I calling on a good balance of students, right? Is it the same 3 students, or is there a good balance of students? That's one really good look for. Another good look for is how many kids are really engaged. Sometimes early career teachers feel like, yeah, everything's going great, but sometimes it's just the teacher and the board are having a great discussion, and one student might be with you. And so numbers of students and the balance of who's doing the talking might be a good place to start.
I love that. And for anybody who's curious, that sneak peek Connie just gave us was of the TELL survey, TELL.
Yeah,
TELL survey. And you can definitely find that with a quick Google search.
It's actually called the TELL project. So that
the TELL project. Okay. I thought that document was called the TELL survey.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, I'm going to trust your expertise on that one over my own. Thanks for helping me out there. So I guess the next question I wanted to ask you was about, a lot of times our evaluations are announced. And so if I'm an early career teacher and I know that I'm about to be observed, what are some things that I can do to just make it manageable in getting ready for an evaluation?
So that's a great question, right? So thinking about how the room is set up. Can everybody see the screen or the board? Sometimes if you share the room with someone else, you need to talk to the teacher about, this really doesn't work for my needs. So can we work on a way that I don't have so many kids with their back to the screen, or just making an adjustment once your students get there, right? Are the materials all easily accessible to the students, or is it going to take them 10 minutes to walk back there and get whatever you need them to get? And if there's an area in the classroom that you can't access and students sit there, students will know that, and they get away with a lot more, right? When they know you can't get back there, than if you can suddenly be right behind them. So one thing to think about before you even have anybody come in is just, what does your classroom look like? And then another thing that might be a good idea is to think about your behavior routines, right? Do you have in your mind what these things would look like? Have you taught them? By teaching them, I mean not just you explained it once, right? But did you go over them and really practice them with students? And is that running smoothly? Is there a consequent ladder, right? Is it clear to you? Because if it's not clear to you, what's the consequence? It's certainly not clear to your students. So here's an example of something you could do for a consequence ladder, right? Were you thinking more about, like, what would you do with the person who's going to evaluate you, Noah? Or just,
I think that might also be a great follow-up question, is if you're about to be observed, you mentioned that you could invite an observer in ahead of time, so an informal observation. Is that a really great place to start with them, to say, hey, could you just look at my room setup and let me know if you have any feedback in advance of my observation?
Yeah, oh, absolutely, right? So I guess that's what maybe I was calling out on this slide, is inviting a colleague or your actual evaluator in for an informal visit and say, if you were going to score this, right, what's an area of strength that you see that I should definitely do again, right? And what's one area of growth that I might consider? Sometimes in a formal visit, when we're getting all of the scores, it might be a lot, but really for an informal visit, you might just want those 2 as a takeaway. Like, what's one thing I definitely should keep doing? And then what's one thing, right, that I could maybe improve on?
I love that so much. And for anybody who's just joining us, we're with Connie Navarro this evening, and she's peer observer with Denver Public Schools, sharing tips for early career teachers on teacher evaluation. If you have questions for Connie, you can use the Q&A app on your Google Hangout to submit your questions. You can also post them on the event page, and I'll make sure we get to them. And Connie, going back to the sort of routines and rituals and classroom management questions, when you're coaching early career teachers, what are some of the just lowest lift, highest impact things that you share with teachers, to help them not only do better on their evaluation, but also just have a stronger hold of their classrooms?
Right, because we really want to do well on our evaluations, but the main thing is, what is it doing for kids, right? I mean, everybody wants the good score, but it's really about, we all went into teaching because we care about kids, right? The biggest lift that you can get with the smallest amount of effort is really waiting for your students to stop talking. When you say to them, you need a routine for, I need you to be quiet and listen to me, and whether that's clase, right? Uno, dos, tres, whatever you're going to say to them, escuchen, right? Écoutez, silence, something. I've seen teachers stand in one particular place in the room when I'm standing right here and I say, écoutez, right? That means be silent. You need to be open with your students about, let's practice that. This is what I want you to do. And then wait for the students to be quiet. If we talk over our students, we are teaching them, hey, that is perfectly okay. Keep talking because you can talk right over me and it doesn't matter.
Do a really good question for that might be, with a teacher who is really nervous, being evaluated, and there are some management issues, especially here, we're still in the first few months of the school year. Are you as an evaluator going to, view it in positive light or in negative light if a teacher kind of bird walks from instruction in order to go back and practice those routines?
Oh, it's absolutely a positive thing in my experience that if there is behavior that needs to be addressed and you need to come out of speaking your target language even, or take a pause from the lesson to say, hey class, or hey you three, right? I need to handle this. And you can do that quietly with just those 3 kids, or you can pause from your teaching and remind the whole class of what the expectation is, right? That's much better. So you're right, Noah. Sometimes people get nervous and they say, I didn't want to stop teaching because you were here, and then oh, the 3 kids turn into 12 kids now, all sort of goofing around in the back of the room. So absolutely, great question.
That's really good to know. We can be so nervous being evaluated by somebody else. It's real peace of mind to know, it's okay to go back to those kind of first days of school, Harry Wong, Fred Jones tricks, and just practice those routines. And before I ask my next question, anybody who is watching us live, you can use that Q&A app on your Google Hangout to submit your questions. We'll make sure Connie answers them live. My next question is, just outside of those classroom management issues and behavior concerns, what are you as an evaluator looking for when you go into a world language classroom?
That's a great question. I thought a lot about this as I was preparing this, and what I look for might be different than what someone in another district looks for, but here's things that everybody is looking for, right? Evaluators in general, no matter where in the country you are, where in Colorado you are, whatever you're teaching, they're looking really for these things. What is the classroom environment like, right? And that's the rituals and routines and the behavior and can all the kids see the board, and right? Did you set up a way for kids to have a group if they needed one? Do you have a standards-based objective? And we're going to talk a little bit about ways you can craft a really nice objective in a minute. Student engagement. So a large percentage of the class being with you, a large percentage of students being with you for a large percent of the class time is really important, right? Sometimes we feel like the evaluator's just looking at us, just at me, right, as a teacher, but it's also about what the students are doing in relation to what you have set up.
Are you able to just expand a little bit on student engagement? I don't know if that's necessarily something that everybody has the same idea in mind when they're thinking about student engagement. Student engagement means no students off task. Does student engagement mean every student facing forward? What are you looking for student engagement?
That's a good point. I think sometimes especially if we grew up in a time where what the student was expected to do was sit with their hands folded and look directly at the teacher the whole time and not to interact with anybody else, those days are past. That's really not what we're looking for, right? So it's okay for kids to be noisy if they're on task. It's okay for there to be a lot of movement and things going on if it's in the target language, right? And if it's about the objective. So If it looks a little bit chaotic, but the students are with you, that's much better than if they're just sitting there motionless, right? Because their bodies can be behaving for you, right? But then their mind is really not on what you're doing. So in foreign language, what we need to see, right, is kids demonstrating their active listening. So are they reacting in some way to you, right? TPRS is a good way to do that, or just gestures, show me you understand this, or if they laugh or clap when you're doing something, right, to show that they know what you're doing. Or if they're turning to the right page in the book and they're turning to their partner when you want them to, and all of those things, right? So we're looking for students to be either demonstrating their active listening or some kind of pair work where they're talking or they're giving a choral response to you, right?
So it almost sounds like in your mind that there's definitely a clear distinction between 100% engagement and 100% compliance. That you're not looking as much as compliance as much as active engagement.
Oh, absolutely, right? Compliant students it feels good sometimes when we're a teacher when that happens, but we don't know that they're actually learning anything, right? If they're just silent, maybe they're listening to us, right? But yeah. We want them to be doing something, not just being compliant.
Awesome. And thank you so much to our, I see a few new viewers have just joined us. Thank you for being here with us. We're with Connie Navarro. And if you have questions for Connie about teacher evaluation, please do submit those using the Q&A app, or you can post them on the event page. We'll be sure to check in on that. And so I think you kind of alluded to this in your answer to the last question, but when we think about what the evaluator is looking at, you're not just looking at the teacher.
Right. Sometimes we think as a teacher, especially early career teacher, it's just the spotlight on me as a teacher, but it's actually on the students and how they're reacting. And we know we can't ever control students. Sometimes people feel overwhelmed that their class might be hard to manage. We can't control them, but we can influence kids, right? So if you have an interesting task and a clear expectation, right, that goes a lot farther with kids than just here, sit there and be silent and here's a worksheet, right? So absolutely, it's about what the students are doing in response to what you're doing. It's also about the teacher adjusting instruction, right, based on those checks for understanding. So are you checking with 3 kids? Are you checking as you circulate? Are you checking with the whole group through choral response, right, through TPR and gestures, things like that?
Awesome. And, Kai, we do have a question from our colleague Michael Miller in Cheyenne Mountain down in the Colorado Springs area. And he asks, what do you think about the new Colorado teacher assessment model, RANDA? I don't know if you've in DPS had a chance to look at that.
I haven't. This is what we use to evaluate teachers in DPS, and DPS made this whole giant 12 different expectations for teachers, and then we also are lucky to have the world language appendix that calls out some things like staying 90% of the time in the target language, right, that I'm not sure what other school districts do, so we're not doing the RANDA, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And, just one thing to point out for all of our Colorado teachers who might be watching this, if you find the CCFLT Facebook page, there was a link posted earlier this week by our colleague Tony Tyson to a Google form related to RANDA, where we as language teachers are being given the opportunity right now during this window to provide Colorado Department of Education with some of what we think could be look-fors for our evaluators. So Michael and anybody else in the state of Colorado, please do take a chance to have your voice heard by communicating on each of those standards what some of the look-fors should be in a world language classroom. And Tony's going to make sure those get to the Colorado Department of Ed. I
did see that. Can you re-announce where they can find that if people want to go on?
Yeah, absolutely. If you search for our CCFLT page on Facebook, you'll see that link from earlier this week from Tony Tyson. We can repost that as well. We have another question for you, Connie, that was actually posted ahead of time, and this might be a really great time to bring it up. In your dealings as just a leader in the state and talking to other folks and your own experience, what are some of the differences that an evaluator might be looking for in a world language classroom versus any of our colleagues in other content areas?
Right. One of the differences is this ACTFL really does want us to use the target language 90% of the time, right? So that impacts academic language and rigor and engagement. Of course, that needs to be comprehensible to students, right? If you stand up to the board and speak your target language all through class and everyone falls asleep or everyone runs around the room, that doesn't do us any good. So that's where checking for understanding, right? Checking that everyone's with you would come in. So that's one thing that an evaluator should be looking for, right? Is that you're using the target language, that the students are doing something to demonstrate that they understand you in that target language, and that the students should be beginning to also use that target language. They can be using their interpretive listening skills and responding to you in the target language, right? Or in English, because they're also demonstrating their understanding of your language. Need to balance that out. So that's one of the key differences that we might be looking for.
And we just had another question come in on the Q&A, and for anybody watching live who's just joined us, you can submit your questions for Connie using the Q&A tab there on your Google Hangout. And this question is asking, what is your favorite technique for covering the daily target objective with students? And is it enough to just have it posted on the board?
Well, from my point of view, so here's what we were going to talk about for might be a good CLO. From my point of view as an evaluator in Denver, it doesn't need to be posted on the board as long as you're clear with students what it is, and if they're clear what it is. If your school wants you to post it, then you should do that. The thing we need to really think about is it effective for students? Are we just being compliant as teachers and saying, yes, I will post it because someone told me I need to be compliant and I must do this? Is it a checklist thing? Or are you posting it so that students can, right, get something out of that? I loved seeing in a classroom where it said, today we will demonstrate, we're going to read this chapter of this novel so that we can, right? And then there was an actual can-do statement. So I love that there was a today we will, right? And sort of your tasks and your goals and what we're going to do, and then so that we can, and then take one of these actual can-do statements. At the end of this presentation, I have a link to the actual can-do statements, or you could easily Google search them, but there's from every level in every mode of communication. This is the summary page, but this is probably a 75-page document with all kinds of great can-do statements, right, at the novice low or intermediate mid, right, range. It actually also goes up to advanced if you were teaching an upper level class and you wanted to pull a higher level can-do statement. But that's a great place to go for objectives instead of that we're going to do something with ER verbs, right, is not as strong an objective as what we can actually do with the language, right? So ACTFL is really great about pulling out things that we can do with the language that might have grammar hidden behind them. But for me, a grammar-based objective is less successful because it's not about what kids are actually doing with the language.
I love that. And just for anybody who's watching, any of our early career language teachers who aren't aware of ACTFL, that's ACTFL. It stands for the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. It is your national world language teacher advocacy and professional organization, and highly encourage you to check them out at actfl.org and consider joining. They're an awesome organization, and the national conference is coming up in just about a month in San Diego. You know, we have a few more questions coming in here, and there's a really great one here. You know, a lot of times we can come to view evaluation as really just a scary thing, right? That this is not about, this is something being done to me, not for me. And we have a question here asking if you can give an example of a success story where evaluations have really improved student outcomes.
Absolutely. No, I think you're right that sometimes we feel like, this is going to happen to me and it feels punitive or whatever. But if it's ongoing and supportive and you can be open to the criticism, because sometimes it can be hard to hear, right? If there's evidence in your evaluation and not just a statement of something that is lacking, it's more useful to a teacher. So that's something you could ask your evaluator. Could I have some evidence of, like, can you give me some examples of what was going on when this was happening? But yeah, I've worked with teachers. Here's an example. I've worked with teachers that at the beginning of the year, things are rough, right? And they're so focused on how to get through the scope and sequence that they're so overwhelmed with that they're not really thinking about how many kids were successful and if they need to go back and reteach that or not. So I've met with folks where we talk about adjusting instruction, right, in the moment and also the next day, right? What information did you get from that exit ticket and what are you doing with it tomorrow? And to have folks really take a look at their practice and then pick one thing that they're going to work on, right? And it might be using that exit ticket to really inform what I'm going to do tomorrow in period 7 that might be different than in period 2, which is not easy, right? But to really think about overall, what am I doing with this exit ticket information? Or sometimes the first step for an early career teacher might be something like, all right, I'm going to be really clear with all of my step-by-step instructions, and I'm going to make sure every kid is with me. First, we're going to take out this paper. Does everyone have paper, right? First, does everybody have this? Right now, we're going to do this. So be open to the criticism and be willing to take 1 or 2 things that you can really do and then do it over and over again for 2 weeks and then invite the person back or invite a neighbor teacher back and say, hey, I've been working on making sure that my warm-up only takes 5 minutes and I set a timer. Can you come in and sort of give me some feedback on how I'm doing on that?
That's a really awesome strategy. You know, our next question, I think going back, you were hitting on this, I think, with the exit tickets, and I might ask you to go just rapid fire hydrant on us. We have a question asking for examples for checks for understanding in the target language. You know, you mentioned that ACTFL has a position statement out that we should be going for 90% target language. So how might we use those checks for understanding as an opportunity to stay in the target language? And what are just some awesome strategies that you've observed teachers doing in order to do that?
Awesome. Sorry, I was looking for my slide while you were talking, so I kind of jumped around a little bit. But to maximize learning and have a high percentage of students be engaged with you from bell to bell, and here's a whole bunch of checks for understanding, right? That the whole group needs to answer your questions, and if you can give an either or a yes, no, right? Or who, what, why, where, when question that has an answer that you've just gone over in the reading or the discussion or the picture that you're talking about, where the whole group has to be with you, right? 100% choral response is a great way to get checks for understanding, and then you could follow it up with a cold call after that, or do a couple of cold calls and then a whole group. What did Bobby say that the person in the picture is doing? Is a way to keep everybody engaged with you. I love the, hey, tell somebody near you, whatever the question is, right? And then pull popsicle sticks. Have you seen that, where you put people's names on the popsicle stick? And then it's truly random, right? Or I see people with everyone's name written on an index card, and that's how they do the cold call, so they're making sure that they're actually getting to everybody. Or I love the idea of having a seating chart with the names on it on a clipboard in front of you, and on Monday I use a green pen and I put a dot on who the kids I called on and how many times, and on Tuesday I'm going to use a red pen, or doesn't matter what color, but a different color, so I know that I've gotten through everybody in that class period. And if anybody has a low number of being called on Monday, I'm going to try and call on them more on Tuesday. People with individual whiteboards, right, where I'm going to ask a question and every kid or every pair of kids has to hold up their whiteboard with the answer. It's a great idea for the teacher to also hold up the answer so that there's feedback and everyone knows what the answer was, because sometimes we get a variety of things and kids aren't sure if theirs was right or if the people across from them were right. And then calling on individual students, I guess I touched on, followed by the whole group, like what did Rico say was the answer to this cultural reading we were just talking about, or whatever. What it is not is calling on one student at a time while the rest of the class waits. So I see that a lot, and that's not a good idea, where I'm like, but I called on every student, and every student sat there for 30 minutes waiting for their turn, right? Or their turn was over, and now they're asleep, or they're on their phone, or they're poking people next to them.
And, you know, something that when you talk about the core response, especially if you're an early career teacher, you don't necessarily have a full toolbox of those. You know, asking your colleagues can be a great thing for that. And, you know, I know something I did early in my career was I asked for a half a day, and I went in the morning and observed kindergarten. And just watching kindergarten for a couple hours, I got so many amazing choral responses and kind of clever ways to check for understanding. And then it was just a matter of bringing those back to my classroom, putting them in Spanish, and you know, great way to quickly and easily do that in a way that's familiar to them, because you know, some of them are going to say, but Miss, I remember that from kindergarten. So even though it's in the tar language, there is a degree of familiarity there.
Well, and so much of what we do in levels 1, 2, and 3 really is like preschool, right? Early school, we're just learning language and talking about colors and numbers and family members and all that. So that's a great matchup to go to kindergarten.
That is just, I'm glad that I'm not the only person who think that's a good idea. And Connie, I will ask you, when we are done here, if you would share your, on just our event page for this Hangout, if you'd share a link to this presentation, if you'd make sure that it's anybody with the link can view it, that would be really awesome. We did get a question asking about sharing this presentation.
Sure.
And huge thanks to any of our colleagues who are watching us live or join this Hangout on your own time on YouTube. We hope this is helpful to you and that you reach out. And Connie, I guess just the final question that I would have for you is, I know you're going to share a couple resources here at the end. So as you're sharing those resources, if you'd also just mention to an early career teacher who's considering joining their professional organization, and you're at the low end of the salary scale here, is that a $35 or $75 investment that's really worth it for an early career language teacher?
Absolutely. To join Colorado Congress of Foreign Language Teachers is going to be a great benefit to any foreign language teacher, but particularly in early career, right? So we have a spring conference coming up. Noah, remind me, is that in February?
Yes, ma'am.
And it's all-day workshops that are full of great ideas for world language teachers, and you can talk with other professionals and eat lunch with them and spend the whole day really gathering resources at the conference. There's also these great Google Hangouts, right, that we're doing for early career teachers. And then just to know that you're part of this membership and this community of world language teachers all over the state of Colorado who are coming together to really refine our craft. It's a great idea to join the professional organization.
Awesome. And for folks who are interested, our organization here in Colorado is CCFLT.org. And our conference is February 18th through the 20th of 2016. We have Senor Wooly, the guy behind Puedo Ir al Baño and many other awesome music videos, is going to be here with us. And registration, I believe, is now actually live as of last week. So please do sign up to join us for that. And Connie, quickly before we say goodnight, do you want to quickly share some of the resources that you'd prepared for?
I did. So I just found out about this last year, and I've been teaching foreign language for 20 years. So the teacher effectiveness for language learning is called the TEL project. And you can do a quick Google search for that, or also it's in the link for that is in my presentation. It's developed by educators for educators, and it has great frameworks and rubrics and self-evaluation documents, or as I mentioned earlier, that you could print out something like this and ask yourself, how often do I do this? Or you can ask, like, even just the math teacher next door, hey, would you come in? Because I'm really working on this, and can you tell me how often you're seeing the performance lessons for example, this one is the performance objectives for the lesson. Are they posted? Are they here? Are they there? Right. The students' learning experiences include student choice or physical movement or hands-on opportunities, and then some other notes. There's different focus feedback tools for different areas, and you can take a look at those online and pick the ones that might be most useful to you as you are gathering data on yourself and on your strengths and on your areas of growth. The TEL project invites you to also invite your evaluator. If you don't have a world language specific document to be evaluated on, say, that one that we use for school is really great, but it would be even better for me if you could give me some feedback on this paper. Would you mind also filling this out while you're there? Or I've heard other teachers say that sometimes their building evaluator will use this instead, which is really great because it's really focused on world language teaching. So here's the tighter view of that. Gives you an idea of what you might find if you explore the website a little bit. Really quickly, I'll just say this can be really helpful if you're inviting an evaluator in who doesn't speak your language, right? I've seen it's a great idea to have a student ambassador. I love when they come in and greet me and say, can I sit with you and translate for you today? I speak French and Spanish, but I don't speak Chinese and I need to evaluate Chinese, so it's really helpful to me. The student ambassador also can tell your visitor, this is our objective and this is how we're working towards it, and really explain what's going on, right? I've also seen the teacher call out, for the benefit of our visitor, this is what we're doing. and then they'll call on a kid and say, can you tell us why that was a higher level question or what was going on with that question? Who can tell our visitor how this relates to today's objective is a great way for when you're staying in your target language to call out to the evaluator, yes, we had an objective, and yes, the students knew what it was. If you want to ask for a pre-evaluation meeting, right, to also talk about maybe using the TEL project documents or just saying, I'm really trying to stay 90% of my target language, and that's a big deal in foreign language, and right, telling your evaluator that that's something you're working on. This is how you can reach me if you'd like to collaborate or connect with me, and this will also be in the presentation that I post, and then these are the links. What else, Noah?
Really, I think the last thing is just I really am just so appreciative of you for giving up your time on your Monday night to share with early career language teachers and anybody else who is interested in teacher evaluation. Just thank you so much for being here with us.
All right. Well, thanks. It was a pleasure. I hope that people will reach out and that they will also join CCFLT and get more out of this.
Thank you so much. And again, this is Connie Navarro, and her presentation momentarily will get posted to our Hangout event page. Thank you all so much for your time, whether you're watching this live or on YouTube. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Connie. She gave you her email address. I'm at Senor G on Twitter, and always happy to meet with anybody and just help my colleagues early in their careers grow as amazing professionals. Have a great night, everybody, and thank you for your time.
All right. Good night. Thanks.